Welcome back to Man vs. Meeple, the show where we talk about everything board game related. I am your host, Jeremy Salinas. We're going to talk to you today about a bicycling game called Flamme Rouge, or Flamme Rouge.
Flamme Rouge.
Something like that. Flame Rogue is what it looks like for this English speaker. So this is cool. You know, Lautapelit has come out with some really cool games. Eclipse being one of my favorite all-time games. This is a real departure from their line of games.
Yeah, it is. It
looks spectacular on the table.
Oh, the components are fantastic, and the especially the bicyclists are excellent.
And I don't think either one of us are experts when it comes to racing games, right?
No, I've played a few. I've Formula Day in my time, Snowtails once, but not a lot.
What I like about this game is that it's so confined. You have a lane of road, and there's only 2 spaces in each road, which makes a multiplayer game really compacted,
right,
and makes the choices really, really cool.
Oh, yeah, with 4 players, people bunch up in this game.
Yeah.
Just like,
just
if you think of a bicycling race, it's just like that. What I like about it is a lot of racing games, some of them try to take on a little too much and become maybe a little overcomplicated.
Sure.
This one really keeps things simple in terms of how it plays, but then as you get through your first game, about 3/4 of the way through, you start to appreciate...
It starts to click.
You start to appreciate the depth in it, and there's an exhaustion that you take, and that kind of slows you down, and it really plays out like it would if you were bicycling.
Right. So let's talk about the components. You're going to get a whole mess of tiles, which are double-sided. You have easy boards, and you have more complicated boards that will have inclines, which will make slipstreaming harder and make ascending hills harder for your cyclists. You have 2 main cyclists for each of the players. Each of those cyclists has their own deck, which is the same decks for every single player in the game.
Right, one is the sprinter, and one is the roulette.
Yeah.
Or roller, but we'll say roulette.
It's basically your sprinter has a very diverse deck. His speeds range from a 2 on the low end to a 9 on the high end.
Right, so he's got the extremes, but he's a little all over the place.
Right, and then you have your roulette, who is your all-around cyclist, and he goes 3 through 7.
Yeah, he's more steady. He's more reliable, obviously.
Each of these cyclists has 3 of the exact same cards. So to play the game, the first thing you'll do is you'll put your bikers behind the start line in turn order. The board's broken into a double white line on the right-hand side and a white line on the left.
Right.
If you're in the right-hand lane, you're in the lead. To start the game, everyone's going to be behind the start line. That's going to determine the turn order for the game when you actually play out the cards that you've picked.
Right.
So each turn, each player is going to either pick their sprinter or their roulette, and they're going to take 4 cards off the top of their deck. And they're going to choose one of those cards and put it face down next to that character and put the other 3 cards face up underneath their deck.
Right. And what's key about this, too, is you think, first when I was playing, when I was picking either my sprinter or roulette, that doesn't have anything to do with when they take their turn on the board. But it has everything to do with the information that you're getting, because you have a set of numbers with the roulette and a set of numbers with the sprinter. And sometimes you kind of want to know what you're going to have with your roulette first, so that you can adjust your sprinter, or vice versa. So you're going to pick one of those cards of the 4, like Jeremy said, put the others on the bottom of the deck face up, and then you're going to do the same thing with your other racer. And then once everyone's done that, you simply go from play order, the guy who's leading the pack, all the way to the back, and everyone takes their turn.
So once everyone plays their card, they're going to put it out of the game permanently, which is really, really cool. So once you've used the card once in the game, it's gone. And you have a limited amount of cards, but you will be getting more cards in the future when you become exhausted. We'll talk about that in a second. So everyone's going to move their either their sprinter or their roulette, the number of spaces that are determined on the cards. Now, you can move through other racers, which is cool, but however, if you are blocked and you're supposed to move onto that racer space, you fall behind them. Yeah,
you just literally can't end your turn on the space that's already occupied.
Once all the players move, then you're going to slipstream, which is typical in competitive cycling.
And it's where the strategy really comes in, just like competitive cycling.
Right.
Because once everyone's moved, you basically, in a general sense, everyone who's in further back in the pack can kind of move a little bit forward because they're slipstreaming. Now, there's some rules for this in the game here.
Yeah, so let's explain slipstreaming. If you guys can see the board here right now, the way slipstreaming is going to work is that the person who is furthest behind has the ability to slipstream if they're one space behind the person in front of them.
Right.
So the first thing that will happen is the black player here will slipstream in behind the blue.
Right.
And then you look at this pack, and they're one space behind the next pack. So the whole entire group will slipstream until the next group.
Yeah, and they define the pack by a collection of bicyclists, no matter what the color, that are all adjacent to one another, connected. Right. So like Jeremy just moved up, 5 guys, and one of the guys is 4 spaces behind the front of that pack.
Right.
But the whole pack moves up. So what you have happening, and you'll take it to its extreme here, this one giant pack then would move up one final step for each of them. Right. And now you've got a nice big bunch.
Right, and that's only going to happen if you're one space behind.
Right. If you're 2 spaces behind, you're not catching up.
And this is when exhaustion takes place. Whoever has a space in front of them will take an exhaustion. So the red player will take one exhaustion card. This is their sprinter, and they take this card and they put it face down. Sorry, the sprinter deck. Put it face down underneath their sprinter deck.
Right.
Which means that this tool will be cycling through their deck, and eventually they'll have to use it. When they use it, of course, like any other card you use in the game, it's gone from the game.
Right. And what's cool about that is at first, when I first started playing this game, I thought, okay, well, those are just cards that clog up your deck, almost like a deck builder.
Sure.
Those bad cards. But at the same time, you quickly, if you find yourself out in the lead for a good portion of the first part of the game, you're going to have so many of those in your deck. And then the fact that they have 2s on them come into play because you're exhausted, and there's going to be times where you draw 4 cards. There's a few times I drew 4 cards and had nothing but 2s.
Right.
So you literally get tired and you're going more slowly.
Right.
What's nice is you can kind of then drift back a little bit, let some people lead, and your bigger cards that you haven't used come back into play, so you get that back.
Right.
It really has an interesting way of capturing that sort of how it is to really sort of ride in a bike race.
Right. 2 of the alternate rules, as we mentioned at the very beginning, were the dual sides of the tiles. There is Ascensions, which are marked by red locations on the board. Ascensions have 2 rules in them. 1, you can't slipstream when you're ascending a hill.
Right, so none of that movement in the packs would happen in the red area.
Right. And the second rule is that no matter what card you play, the most you can move in those spaces is 5.
Right.
So if you play a 9 card in there, as soon as you move into that location, if you've already moved 5, or say you've moved 3 and you go into your first red spot, you can only move 2 more spaces because that's part of that ascension area. And the reverse of that is descending. That's the blue areas, which you see right here.
Right.
The great thing about descending is that no matter what card you play, it's always a 5.
Right.
Minimum. So if you play a 2 card, it's going to move you 5 spaces.
Even if you start at the end of a descent.
Well, as long as you start in the descent area.
Exactly. If your biker is in a blue spot, even if it's the last of, say, 3 blue spots, you get that bonus movement because you're coming off of a hill.
Right. So people could look at it and say, well, I'm just going to play the best card possible. It's not the case. You're really kind of paying attention to the cards that you have available to you. Now, it's going to be common knowledge to you about which cards you've already played. So some of the strategy comes into when do I play my ascension, or when do I play my cards that will take effect during the dissensions, and when do I not want to burn a good card on an ascension.
Right.
And not only that, but the slipstreaming portion as well. This is a really cool mechanic because, say, for instance, I have my ruler move so many spaces. I may want to make my sprinter move 1 space further because that's just going to pull him along that 1 extra space.
If you can stagger your movement, especially in a 2-player game because things are a little more opened up.
Right.
If you can stagger your own movement so there's that 1 space, you're going to get a little bit of boost out of it. It's a little difficult in a 2-player game to kind of second guess what the other guy is going to be doing and taking advantage of that. In a 4-player game, however, there's going to be a lot more slipstreaming, because the pack is going to be pretty thick, so it's going to sort of collect up. So you can really use the slipstreaming to your advantage in a multiplayer game, I think, a little bit more than you can in 2 players.
I would agree. The game ends with the first player to get across the finish line. If there is a tie for multiple players getting across, it's whoever gets across the furthest. So, yeah, that is Flamme Rouge. What are your thoughts?
I really like it. We haven't tried it too many times to take advantage of all of these different courses because there's so many different courses that you can build here that kind of pace the game out a little bit differently.
Sure.
things like in our games, we've found that you don't want to burn your 9 cards right away.
Sure.
You hold on to those bigger numbers so that at the end of the race, you can really pour it on. Because if at the end of the race, you're going 2 at a time,
you're in trouble.
You're not going to win. They'll pass you up.
Right.
But I really like the game. It's to me, this is what a race game should be, because some race games, like I said earlier, maybe try to be a little bit too complicated. And in my opinion, a good race game is one that you can get in and get out of pretty quickly.
Right.
No pun intended.
Right.
But these games don't usually offer the kind of depth that you really want to spend a long time playing.
Right.
You just get in, and this one does it perfectly. The amount of depth in terms of like trying to determine, okay, what cards have I played? What ones do I want to hold on to? How much exhaustion have I taken, and then try to manage that slipstreaming really gives the perfect amount of depth for a game like this, in my opinion.
100% agree. I think that as you mentioned, that it does have depth in it, but it doesn't outweigh its welcome. It takes about 30 to 40 minutes, even with 4 players, to get through. And I love the compacted board.
Yeah,
I love the idea that you only have 2 spaces to move in, so you could be playing a 9 card and only get 2 movement out of it if you move into a pretty thick pack that doesn't get you anywhere, right? So,
right. Yeah, it's a really fun game. I'm looking forward to trying some of the different courses and really experimenting a little bit more with the Ascensions and Descensions, because most of our games have been on the straight up. We've only tried the Descents, the flat ground, which is also fun.
Yeah.
It's just a different sort of game. It's a little more straightforward.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm looking forward to play this a few more times.
So that is Flamme Rouge from Lautapelit. Go ahead and check it out, guys. Make comments in our YouTube channel, please. Subscribe to us, of course.
Like us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And thanks a lot. Check us next time on Man vs. Meeple.
Bye-bye.
Season 1 of Man vs. Meeple is sponsored by TMG Games, publisher of great games like Yokohama, Guilds of London, and the soon-to-be-released Colosseum.